Constantinople, queen of cities, the object of every conqueror's desire, the ultimate prize. It appealed because it was playing hard to get, situated in a highly defensible position with impenetrable walls and a quality professional army guarding it. So imagine the sheer shock and disbelief when news spread of how a band of unorganized Latin hooligans on their way to reclaim the Holy Land just, took possession of it in total war. It felt like a joke. The fearsome warriors who subjugated countless peoples, such as Chavaraz and Muawiyah, with large armies too, failed to conquer Constantinople, a city with an aura of infallibility. Well, it takes a funny accident just as unbelievable as the sack of Constantinople and the Fourth Crusade to right this wrong. And that's exactly what happened in 1261. I couldn't recount the detailed story last time on Eastern Rome Summarized, and since we'll be picking up the series again soon, I thought why not dive deeper into this almost miraculous event and its celebration, which was very traditional and well planned in contrast. So I invited no-budget films to recap for you the Romans' retaking of their beloved city and the context, while I will discuss Michael VIII Palaiologos Triumphal procession in honor of it. Please welcome him to the stage, and I'll see you in a bit.
In the aftermath of the Fourth Crusade's capture and sack of Constantinople in 1204, the Eastern Roman Empire was divided into several states by the leaders of the Fourth Crusade, wherein the one that controlled Constantinople was the Latin Empire, claiming to be a successor of the Eastern Roman Empire it destroyed. The Eastern Roman Empire itself, however, was not entirely destroyed, as the capture of Constantinople had also led to the creation of what would be the three successor states to the Eastern Roman Empire, which were the Empire of Nicaea in Western Asia Minor, the Empire of Trebizond along the Black Sea in Northeast Asia Minor, and the Despotate of Epirus in Western Greece. Among these successor states, the Empire of Nicaea was the most successful, that in 1235, its emperor John III Ducas Vatatzes even laid siege to Latin Constantinople but failed. Despite the failure to take back Constantinople, John III's reign at least saw the Empire of Nicaea expand into Europe by annexing land in Thrace and Macedonia from the Bulgarians and Epirus, and thus entirely surrounding the weak and impoverished Latin Empire to Constantinople and its surroundings. It may have seemed that the Nicaeans now had every means to take back Constantinople. However, following John III's death in 1254, his son and successor Theodore II Lascaris did not focus on the objective of taking it back due to having to take care of the threats posed to Nicaea by both Epirus and Bulgaria. With Theodore II's death in 1258, the regency for his young son and successor John IV Lascaris fell under the powerful aristocrat and general Michael Palaiologos, who in 1259 seized power by having himself crowned as the co-emperor of Nicaea. Later in 1259, Michael's Nicaean forces and their allies defeated the massive coalition of the Latins and Epirotes at the Battle of Pelagonia, which therefore cleared all obstacles for the Empire of Nicaea's ultimate objective, the reconquest of Constantinople. In 1260, Michael himself led an army to once again lay siege to Latin Constantinople, this time attacking the Galata quarter across the Golden Horn. This attempt, however, failed as the Nicaeans had no means to breach the city's walls. Thus, Michael abandoned his siege after making a truce with the Latin Emperor Baldwin II. Although making a truce, Michael used it in order to make preparations to once again besiege Constantinople, which he did so by concluding an alliance with the Republic of Genoa, the main rival of the Republic of Venice, the main ally of the Latin Empire. After sealing an alliance with Genoa, Michael thus sent his general, Alexios Strategopoulos, with a small task force of only 800 soldiers, most of which were Cuman mercenaries to Thrace, in order to survey the walls of Constantinople and scout on the activity of the Latin troops. As this task force arrived at the village of Silimbria, 60 kilometers west of Constantinople, local farmers there, known as the Thelemetarioi, informed Alexios that the entire Latin garrison in Constantinople, including the Venetian fleet, were away from the capital to conduct a raid on the Nicaean-held island of Daphnusia and the Black Sea. Initially, Alexios was hesitant to attack, believing that with his small task force, he would be easily defeated if the Latin army returned, all while he too was afraid that he would be exceeding his orders from Michael, who did not order him to lead an attack on the city in the first place. However, seeing this as the perfect opportunity, as this may be the only time that Constantinople would be left undefended by its garrison, Alexios decided that it was time to retake the city, and thus he marched east with his troops to the city walls. On the night of July 24, 1261, as Alexios and his men approached the city walls, they first took refuge at a monastery near the Pegay Gate, all while a small division of his army, including the same Thelematarioi farmers, managed to find a secret passage into the city underneath the walls. Using the secret passage, these men thus made it into the city, wherein they climbed up the walls, killed off the sleeping guards defending it, and thus opened the gate, allowing Alexios and his men entry to the city. Once the troops were inside, they immediately gained control of the land walls, all while the remaining Latin troops within the city were taken by surprise. Although some of them still resisted by fighting back against the Nicaeans, though without achieving anything as the Nicaeans still gained the upper hand. The Greek population of the city meanwhile welcomed the Nicaeans as their liberators, whereas Alexios placed many of them on the walls to make it look like to the Latin troops if they came back that he had taken back the city with a large army. In the meantime, as panic broke out between the Latins and Venetians within Constantinople, whereas many of them rushed to the docks in order to flee the city by ship, the Latin Emperor Baldwin II was asleep at the Blachernae Palace. The noise of the fighting, however, woke Baldwin up, who later realized that Nicaean troops had already entered the city, and rather than putting up a resistance, Baldwin, like many Venetians and Latins here, also rushed to the docks, where for the Emperor was at the seaside Bucolion Palace south of the city. In his flight, Baldwin, who had no time to ready his equipment, left behind his crown and scepter, though at least he managed to make it safely to the docks, despite dodging the skirmishes, and thus he was able to flee the city by a Venetian ship for the Greek island of Evia, and from there he would head to Athens, and then to Apulia in Italy, and finally back to France. The Nicaean troops meanwhile thus rushed deep into the city, whereas Alexios ordered them to burn down the Venetians' warehouses and quarter along the Golden Horn, in order to prevent the Venetians from docking. The Venetian ships, which numbered up to 30, carrying the main Latin garrison that had finished raiding Daphnusia, true enough arrived in the morning of July 25, and although they came right in time to save the remaining Latins fleeing the city, they were too late to save the city itself. To make things worse for the Venetians and Latins, as they returned back west, many of them died of starvation aboard these ships, considering that the fleet did not bring enough food supplies for the journey back to Western Europe. Thus, on July 25 of 1261, Constantinople itself had been taken by the Empire of Nicaea, and thus meaning the restoration of the Eastern Roman Empire. The victorious general Alexios Strategopoulos thus had Baldwin's crown and scepter, which he left behind, sent to Michael Palaiologos' camp over in Asia Minor. When receiving the news of the recapture of Constantinople from his older sister Irene, Michael at first did not believe it, thinking it was a joke, as he true enough failed to capture the city in the previous year. However, when the messenger sent by Alexios arrived, bringing with him Baldwin's crown and scepter, Michael was thus convinced that his troops achieved their goal, and so he set off for Constantinople. The video will thus continue with Michael's entry to Constantinople in the triumphal parade, which would now be narrated by Byzansimp. If you want to know more about the Roman reconquest of Constantinople, then please check out Summer of 1261, a Byzantine epic, the Lego film I made before focusing on the said event, which can be found in my channel No Budget Films and in the description below.
So that was how the Romans accidentally retook their home, surprising the Latins as they once did to them 57 years ago, ending imperial exile. Michael Palaiologos was, of course, thrilled to hear the news, and even more thrilled that it was in his reign and not anyone else's that Constantinople returned to Roman hands. He took it as a sign of God's approval of his emperorship, and being the natural politician that he was, he maximized the joyous occasion to the benefit of his own legitimacy, at the expense of the young Laskarid Vasilevsky he was sworn to guard. The first step was, of course, to stage a triumphal procession for the ages that one would not soon forget, and contemporary historians made sure to leave us ample descriptions, as this was also the big talk back in the day. So, using the accounts of Georgios Agropolitis and Georgios Bagimeris, I shall narrate to you Palaiologos Triumph. Constantinople was reconquered in July, but Michael waited until August before he entered the city. August 15th, in fact, because he knew symbolic dates were important, so he chose the Dormition of the Mother of God and acquired a fitting icon of the Theotokos, said to have been painted by the Luke himself, to take with him. On the 14th, he arrived before the city with his entourage, including his friend Acropolitis, his wife Theodora, and his young son, the future Andronikos II. It was gonna be all about him and his imperial legitimacy, his glory. Notice how Ioannis IV Laskaris was left alone in Nicaea. Palaiologos made sure piety was extensively shown during the procession on the next day, and Acropolitis wrote the prayers that would be recited then, preferably by the patriarch Arsenios. But he was on a rocky relationship with Palaiologos and did not come, something we will elaborate on in Eastern Rome Summarized. Thus, the Metropolitan of Kyzikos, Georgios Klaides, did it instead. He took the icon, climbed up the Golden Gate, performed a service, and gave thanks for the Roman victory. The emperor and his people knelt. When Cleitus finished with one prayer, everyone present will call out Kyrie eleison 100 times. Then the metropolitan moved on to the next prayer. This repeated until all the prayers were recited, and Acropolitis proudly claims he had written 13 of them, so it took quite some time. Then Palaiologos finally entered Constantinople through the same Golden Gate, the default triumphal gate since the days of Theodosius II, although he would be the last emperor to do so, given that there was nothing worth celebrating during the last years of the empire's existence. Now, that day being the Dormition aside, the Virgin was also Constantinople's patron saint, she who saved the city from countless sieges before 1204, and Michael honored her by letting her icon precede him, while he followed humbly on foot. We have seen this kind of practice during the triumph of Ioannis II Komnenos in 1133, which was a likely inspiration for this triumph. Michael continued with the conventional triumph route, the Messi, the main road of Constantinople, all the way to Studios Monastery, where he put the icon of the Theotokos away, and he continued by himself to the Hagia Sophia, where he gave thanks to Christ. Finally, the triumphal procession was ended, and he reached the Great Palace, the ancient residence of the emperors. Why not use the Vlacherna Palace, as the Komneni had done? Well, because the Latin emperors sort of quote-unquote polluted that one, and cleaning the Vlachernite required some time, according to Pachymeres, who was only a child when this all took place, but should have seen enough of it to leave a reliable account. So that's the gist of Palaiologos Triumph, a very grand and joyous one. Wait, I hear you say, what about Alexios Strategopoulos, the man who actually did all the hard work of taking Constantinople? Is Michael taking full credit for the victory of another? Well, not quite. Alexios was indeed honored, but not as much as we think he deserved to be. And it was after Michael's ego was fully sated. Some unspecified time after August 15th, Patriarch Arsenios made it to Constantinople, as was his place, and despite his differences with the Palaiologan emperor, he formally crowned Michael in the Hagia Sophia, 57 years after the last Roman emperor was elevated in Justinian's masterpiece. After that, Strategopoulos got his mini-triumph through the city, nowhere as grand or as well-sourced as Michael's, although his name was allowed to be commemorated in church services along that of the emperor and the patriarch for a year afterwards. So, not too bad, I guess? The aftermath of the Reconquest and the triumph would be soon covered in the next episode of Eastern Rome Summarized. Michael's new arrangements for the city, how he and Arsenios fell out completely and that caused innumerable woes for the empire, and how he cruelly blinded a child to stay in power. Sounds fun, doesn't it? I hope this video serves as a nice refresher of the Roman story up until 1261, and now that I've covered this triumph and done it justice, I don't need to feel bad about skipping it in the coming video. So, cheers! We may soon begin the final chapter of the empire's history, a long and grueling one, but no less exciting as it always had been since 1753 BC. And go check out No Budget Films if you want. Until next time.